Captain Jake Miller checked his fuel gauge for the third time in 10 minutes. The red warning light blinked at him like an angry eye. His cargo ship, the Wanderer, was running on fumes, and the nearest fuel station was still 2 days away through normal space routes. Jake rubbed his tired eyes and looked at the star chart on his console. The safe passage through council space would take him around the long way, adding another week to his journey. But there was another option. A shortcut through the Crimson Nebula that would cut his travel time in half. The problem was simple. The shortcut went right past a world called Keth Prime. Every spacer in the galaxy knew about Keth Prime. It was marked with warning beacons in 17 different languages. The signs all said the same thing: Forbidden Zone, do not approach. Apex predators. Jake had been hauling cargo for 15 years. He had seen pirates, asteroid fields, and solar storms. He had survived engine failures and food poisoning from bad station rations, but he had never seen a shadow maw. Nobody he knew had ever seen one and lived to talk about it. The fuel gauge blinked again. Jake made his choice. He punched in the coordinates for the Crimson Nebula and engaged the hyperdrive. The stars stretched into lines and the Wanderer jumped into hyperspace. Jake settled back in his pilot seat and tried not to think about what lived on Keth Prime. The journey through hyperspace should have been smooth. Jake had made thousands of jumps before. But as the Wanderer approached the edge of the Crimson Nebula, something went wrong. The ship shuddered and dropped out of hyperspace. Early warning lights filled the cockpit with red light. The main engine was offline. Life support was running on backup power. And according to his navigation system, he was drifting toward Keth Prime. Jake worked fast. He tried to restart the main engine, but the power coupling was fried. He rerouted power from non-essential systems, but it was not enough to break free from the planet's gravity. The Wanderer was going down. Jake strapped himself into his crash seat and activated the emergency beacon. The signal would tell any rescue ships where to find him. If anyone was brave enough to come looking, the ship hit the atmosphere hard. Jake felt his teeth rattle as the Wanderer shook like a toy in a child's hand. The heat shields glowed red hot. Through the viewport, he could see thick jungle canopy rushing up to meet him. The crash was not as bad as it could have been. Jake had managed to find a small clearing between the massive trees. The Wanderer's landing gear deployed at the last second, and the ship hit the ground with a bone-jarring thud that threw Jake against his restraints. For a moment, everything was quiet. Then Jake heard the sound of settling metal and the hiss of escaping atmosphere. He was alive. He was on Keth Prime, and somewhere in the jungle around him, the galaxy's most dangerous predators were probably already moving toward the crash site. Jake unbuckled his restraints and ran a quick system check. The ship was damaged, but not destroyed. The hull was intact, which meant he had air to breathe. The engines were completely dead, but the backup power would last for maybe a week if he was careful. He grabbed his emergency kit and his sidearm. The weapon felt small and useless in his hand. Council reports said that Shadowmaw had armor-like skin that could stop plasma bolts. But it was better than nothing. Jake opened the airlock and stepped onto Keth Prime. The jungle was like nothing he had ever seen. The trees were enormous, their trunks so wide that 10 men holding hands could not wrap around them. Vines hung like thick ropes from branches high overhead. The air was hot and humid, filled with the sounds of insects and strange bird calls. Everything was green. Not the gentle green of earth plants, but a dark, hungry green that seemed to watch him. Jake could see movement in the shadows between the trees. Things that rustled and clicked and whispered to each other in languages he did not understand. He activated his emergency beacon and checked his scanner. The device showed dozens of life forms in the immediate area. Most were small, probably insects or birds. But there were larger signatures moving through the jungle. Much larger. Jake set up a small camp near his ship. He unfolded a portable shelter and activated its power field. The barrier would keep out most small creatures, but he doubted it would stop a shadow maw if one decided to pay him a visit. As the sun set, the jungle came alive with new sounds. Howls and roars echoed through the trees. Things moved in the darkness just beyond the reach of his camp lights. Jake sat with his back to the ship's hull, his weapon ready, and waited for morning. The first night was the longest of his life. Every sound made him jump. Every shadow looked like death approaching on silent feet. But morning came, and Jake was still alive. He spent the day trying to repair his ship. The damage was worse than he had thought. The main engine was completely fried, and several key components were missing entirely. Without replacement parts, the Wanderer was never going to fly again. Jake's emergency rations would last maybe 2 weeks if he was careful. His water recycler was working, but the local water sources were unknown. He could try to hunt for food, but everything on this planet was probably either poisonous or big enough to hunt him back. On the second day, Jake found tracks near his camp. They were huge, each footprint as long as his forearm. The creature that made them had claws that left deep grooves in the hard earth. The tracks circled his camp twice before disappearing into the jungle. Jake followed the tracks for a short distance, then thought better of it and returned to his ship. Whatever had made those tracks was watching him. He could feel eyes on him whenever he left the safety of his shelter. The Council patrol ship arrived on the third day. Jake saw it. On his scanner, a small dot in orbit high above. He activated his emergency beacon and sent out a distress call. For a moment, hope filled his chest like warm sunlight. Then the patrol ship moved away. Jake watched in disbelief as the dot disappeared from his scanner. He sent another distress call, then another. But the ship was gone. Jake sat in his pilot seat and stared at the empty scanner screen. The Council had written him off. As far as they were concerned, he was already dead. No rescue was coming. He was alone on a world full of monsters, with no way off and no one coming to help. That night, the howls in the jungle were louder. Closer. Jake checked his weapon for the 100th time and settled in to wait. Tomorrow he would have to venture deeper into the jungle to find food and water. Tomorrow, he would probably meet the creatures that had made those tracks. Tomorrow, he would find out if the stories about Shadow Maw were true. Jake's water ran out on the 4th day. The recycler had finally given up with a sad wheeze and a puff of smoke. He stared at the empty container in his hands and felt his throat burn with thirst. The jungle around him was full of streams and pools, but he had no way to know which ones were safe to drink. He grabbed his scanner and his weapon. The device showed a water source about half a mile to the north. It was time to leave the safety of his camp and venture into the green hell that surrounded him. The jungle was worse during the day. The heat pressed down on him like a heavy blanket. Sweat poured down his face and soaked through his clothes. Insects buzzed around his head in thick clouds. Some of them bit him, leaving red welts that itched and burned. Jake pushed through hanging vines and stepped over fallen logs. The trees were so thick that very little sunlight reached the ground. Everything was shadows and green twilight. His boots squelched in the soft earth, and strange flowers watched him pass with petals that looked too much like eyes. He found the stream exactly where his scanner said it would be. The water was clear and cold, flowing over smooth stones. Jake knelt beside it and filled his container. The water tasted clean, but he added purification tablets just to be safe. As he drank, Jake heard something moving in the bushes behind him. He froze with the water container halfway to his lips. The sound came again. Something big was walking through the jungle, breaking branches and crushing plants under heavy feet. Jake set down his water and slowly reached for his weapon. The footsteps were getting closer. He could hear breathing now, deep and slow like a sleeping giant. Through the green wall of plants, he caught a glimpse of something black moving between the trees. The creature stepped into the clearing by the stream. Jake had seen pictures of Shadowmaw in council files, blurry images taken from long distance by automated probes, but nothing had prepared him for seeing one up close. The creature was huge, standing 12 feet tall on powerful legs. Its skin was like black armor, covered in scales that gleamed in the filtered sunlight. 6 arms ended in claws as long as Jake's fingers, but it was the eyes that stopped Jake's breath in his throat. They glowed like molten gold, intelligent and curious. The creature was not looking at him like a predator looks at prey. It was studying him the way a scientist studies an interesting specimen. Jake and the Shadowmaw stared at each other across the small clearing. Neither moved. The jungle around them had gone completely silent, as if every living thing was holding its breath. The creature took a step forward. Jake's hand tightened on his weapon, but he did not draw it. Something told him that any sudden movement would be a mistake. The Shadowmaw tilted its massive head and made a sound like distant thunder. Jake realized the creature was trying to communicate. He cleared his throat and spoke slowly. "Hello, I'm Jake. I don't want to hurt you." The Shadowmaw's golden eyes narrowed. It made another sound, different from the first. Jake's universal translator, clipped to his belt, beeped and struggled to process the alien language. After a moment, it spoke in a mechanical voice. Curiosity. Small thing, not fear sent. Strange. Jake blinked in surprise. The creature was intelligent. It could speak. And it seemed as curious about him as he was about it. "You can understand." "Me?" Jake asked. The Shadowmaw nodded, a very human gesture that looked strange on such an alien form. "Words through machine. Crude but functional. You are human, yes?" "From Council space?" "Yes," Jake said. "My ship crashed. I'm stranded here." The creature made what might have been laughter. "Council beings flee from us, run like prey animals. You do not run. Why?" Jake looked down at his empty water container and back at the towering alien. "I'm too tired to run, and too thirsty." This seemed to amuse the Shadowmaw. It pointed one clawed hand at the stream. "Water is safe. Drink." Jake knelt and refilled his container. The Shadowmaw watched him with those burning gold eyes. When Jake had finished drinking, the creature spoke again. "I am called Raven in your simple tongue. You crash in my territory. By rights, you are mine to hunt." Jake's hand moved toward his weapon, but stopped when Raven held up one massive clawed hand. "But you interest me, small human. You offer greeting instead of weapons. You show respect instead of fear. This is new thing." "You're not what I expected either," Jake admitted. "The Council says your people are mindless killers." Raven's eyes flashed with what might have been anger. "Council says many false things. They fear what they do not understand. We defend ourselves when attacked. This makes us monsters in their small minds." Jake pulled out one of his emergency food packs and opened it. The smell of synthetic protein filled the air. He looked up at Raven and made a decision that went against every survival instinct he had. "Are you hungry?" Jake asked, holding out half of his meager meal. Raven stared at the offered food in complete silence. Several long seconds passed. Then, the massive alien leaned down and carefully took the food pack in one clawed hand. The claws that could tear through metal were gentle enough not to crush the small package. "You offer food to predator," Raven said quietly. "This thing is not done, ever. Where I come from, sharing food is how strangers become friends," Jake said. Raven examined the food pack with great care, then tasted it. The alien's face was hard to read, but Jake thought he saw approval. "Bland but nutritious," Raven said. "Your people eat for survival, not pleasure." "Pretty much," Jake agreed. "What do your people eat?" "Many things. Fruit from the singing trees. Fish from the deep pools. Sometimes the large hoppers that nest in the rock caves." Raven paused. counsel species when they trespass and attack first. Jake felt a chill run down his spine, but he kept his voice steady. And what about crashed pilots who share their lunch? Raven made that thunderous sound again, and Jake realized it was laughter. Crashed pilots who share lunch are new category. Must think on this. The two unlikely companions sat by the stream as the day grew later. Raven showed Jake which plants were safe to eat and which ones would kill him. The alien's knowledge of the jungle was vast and detailed. In return, Jake told Raven about human space travel and the worlds beyond Keth Prime. Your people explore. For knowledge, Raven observed, not for conquest. Sometimes for conquest too, Jake admitted. But mostly we're just curious about what's out there. Curiosity is a good trait. My people value this also. As the sun began to set, Raven stood and stretched to full height. I must return to my nest. The night hunters will emerge soon. They are not as reasonable as I. Will I see you again? Jake asked. Raven tilted its head, considering. Perhaps, if you survive the night, your metal nest should protect you from most dangers. The massive alien turned and melted back into the jungle as silently as it had appeared. Jake was alone again, but something had changed. For the first time since crashing on Keth Prime, he did not feel completely hopeless. He made his way back to his ship as darkness fell. The jungle came alive with its nightly chorus of howls and calls, but somehow they seemed less threatening now. Jake had met the galaxy's most feared predator and lived to tell about it. More than that, he had made a friend. Raven returned the next morning while Jake was trying to fix his broken scanner. The massive alien approached the camp without making a sound, appearing from the jungle like a living shadow. Jake looked up from his work to find those golden eyes watching him with interest. You survived the night, Raven observed. Good. The razor cats came close to your metal nest but did not attack. They fear the energy barrier. Jake wiped sweat from his forehead and gestured to the scattered electronic parts around him. Barely. My equipment is falling apart. This scanner worked fine yesterday, but now it won't even turn on. Raven moved closer and examined the broken device. One clawed finger touched the circuit board with surprising gentleness. Moisture damage. The jungle air carries much water. Your metal tools were not made for this place. Can you fix it? Jake asked hopefully. Perhaps. My people have different ways of working with such things. Raven disappeared into the jungle and returned a few minutes later carrying something that looked like a large seed pod. The alien split the pod open with one claw, revealing a thick, clear gel inside. Living circuit protector, Raven explained, carefully applying the gel to the scanner's exposed electronics. Grown in the deep caves where the thinking fungi live. It will shield your device from moisture and small impacts. Jake watched in amazement as the gel seemed to merge with his scanner circuits. When Raven finished, the device powered up immediately and showed a clearer display than it had even when new. That's incredible, Jake said. Your people can grow technology? All technology is grown, Raven replied. Metal and plastic are crude materials. Living systems adapt and improve themselves. Watch. Raven produced what looked like a small flat beetle from a pouch on its belt. The alien whispered something to the creature, and it scurried onto Jake's broken water recycler. The beetle's shell split open, revealing tiny tools that began working on the damaged components. Repair symbiont, Raven explained. It eats broken metal and waste products, then excretes purified materials in proper configurations. Your water maker will function better than before. Jake stared as the beetle worked with impossible precision, rebuilding his recycler from the inside out. How long have your people been developing this kind of technology? Many thousands of your years. We learned early that fighting the jungle was foolish. Better to become part of it, to work with living systems instead of against them. Over the Following days, Raven visited Jake's camp regularly. The alien taught him which fruits were safe to eat and how to find them. Some hung from the highest branches and could only be reached by climbing. Others grew underground and had to be carefully dug up. The jungle was full of food if you knew where to look. Council species see only danger here, Raven said as they gathered sweet berries from a thorny vine. They cannot imagine that life finds ways to help other life. Your people are different, yes? You adapt to new places instead of trying to change them. Jake thought about human colonies he had visited. Some had indeed changed themselves to fit their new worlds. Others had tried to remake alien environments into copies of Earth. We do both, I think. Depends on the situation. Wisdom is knowing when to bend and when to stand firm, Raven agreed. The alien also shared stories of Shadow Maw culture. They were not the savage hunters the Council believed them to be. They valued art, philosophy, and the pursuit of excellence. In all things, their society was built around individual achievement, but achievement that served the greater good. We compete to become better, Raven explained one evening as they sat by Jake's campfire. Stronger, faster, more skilled. But a person who becomes great only for themselves is considered sick in the mind. True greatness lifts others up. Humans have a similar idea, Jake said. We call it leadership. Yes, this word fits. Each Shadow Maw seeks to become leader of their own destiny, then help others find theirs. Jake learned that Raven was considered a philosopher among their people. The aliens spent much of their time thinking about the nature of existence, the meaning of strength, and the proper relationship between predator and prey. This was why Raven had been so curious about Jake's strange behavior. In all my years, I have never met prey that offered friendship, Raven said. You challenge my understanding of how universe works. Maybe I'm not really prey, Jake suggested. Maybe the whole predator and prey thing is more complicated than it looks. Raven's eyes glowed brighter in the firelight. Explain this thought. Jake struggled to put his feelings into words. Where I come from, we learned that cooperation often works better than competition. If two groups fight all the time, they both get weaker. But if they work together, they both get stronger. But one must be stronger than the other, Raven protested. This is natural law. Sure, but strength comes in different forms. You're physically stronger than me, but I might know things you don't. Together, we know more than either of us alone. Raven was quiet for a long time, thinking about this idea. Finally, the alien spoke. You suggest that predator and prey can become something new together, partners instead of enemies. Why not? Jake asked. We're already doing it. As the days passed, Jake and Raven worked together to improve the humans' chances of survival. Raven's biotechnology merged with Jake's mechanical systems in ways neither had expected. The ship's life support became more efficient when organic components were added. Jake's tools lasted longer when treated with living preservatives. Most importantly, Jake learned to see the jungle through Shadow Maw eyes. What had seemed like a hostile wilderness became a complex ecosystem where everything had its place. The dangers were still real, but they could be understood and avoided with proper knowledge. You begin to move like one of us, Raven observed. As Jake navigated through a patch of sensor plants without triggering their defensive thorns. Soon you will think like one of us also. Is that good or bad? Jake asked. It is evolution, Raven replied. You become something new. Not human and not Shadow Maw, but something that can live in both worlds. Jake had been on Keth Prime for 2 weeks when they found the crashed ship. It was an old council vessel, probably a survey craft that had gone down years ago. Most of it was overgrown with vines and moss, but the cargo hold was intact. Replacement parts, Jake said excitedly, as he examined the wreckage. If we can get some of these components working, I might be able to fix my engines. Raven helped him extract the usable parts. The alien strength made easy work of moving heavy components that Jake could never have handled alone. More importantly, Raven's living tools could interface with the old Council technology in ways that Jake's equipment could not. Your thinking machines and our growing machines work well together, Raven observed as they connected organic circuits to mechanical processors. Perhaps this is a sign of greater partnership to come. Jake looked up from his work to find Raven watching him with an expression he had learned to recognize as hope. It took Jake and Raven 3 days to get the hybrid engine system working. The combination of human technology and Shadowmaw biotechnology created something neither species had seen before. Living circuits grew through mechanical components, making the engine more efficient than anything in Jake's experience. "Your ship will fly better than before the crash," Raven said as they finished the final connections. "The organic systems will repair small damage automatically and adapt to changing conditions." Jake ran through the startup sequence, hardly daring to believe it would work. The engines hummed to life with a sound that was somehow more musical than before. All systems showed green. The Wanderer was ready to fly again. "I can't believe it," Jake said, staring at the display panels. "We actually did it. We make good." "Team," Raven agreed. "But now you must choose. You can leave this place and return to your people, or you can stay and learn more of our ways." Jake looked at his friend, this massive alien who had saved his life and changed his understanding of the universe. "What if I do both? What if I take you with me?" Raven's golden eyes widened in surprise. "Leave Keth Prime? But your people fear us. They would attack on sight. Not if I explain first. Not if I show them you're not what they think you are." Jake stood up and faced the towering alien. "Raven, you could be the first of your people to speak directly to the Council. You could change everything. And if they refuse to listen? If they see only monster when they look at me?" Jake thought about this carefully. He knew the risks. The Council had spent centuries believing that Shadowmaw were mindless killers. Changing that belief would not be easy. "Then we make them listen," Jake said finally. "We show them proof they can't ignore." After much discussion, Raven agreed to come with Jake to the nearest Council station. The alien had to modify the ship's interior to accommodate their size, growing new organic supports and seating systems. Jake watched in fascination as his cargo hold transformed into something that could house a 12-foot-tall passenger. The journey to Station Alpha took 2 days through hyperspace. Jake spent most of the time coaching Raven on Council protocols and helping the alien practice using the universal translator for formal speech. Raven was a quick learner, but some concepts did not translate well between their languages. "When they ask about hunting," Jake explained, "don't use the word prey. It makes them nervous. Say food animals or wildlife instead." "But prey is an accurate term," Raven protested. "Why use false words?" "Because accurate words can be scary words. We need them to listen before they get scared." Station Alpha appeared on their screens like a metal flower blooming in space. The massive structure housed over 50,000 beings from dozens of different species. It was one of the major trading hubs in Council space, always busy with merchants and travelers. Jake opened a communication channel to station control. "This is cargo vessel Wanderer requesting docking permission. Wanderer, this is station control. We show you coming from restricted space. Please explain your route." Jake took a deep breath. "Control, I have an emergency situation. I was stranded in the Crimson Nebula for 2 weeks. I have a passenger aboard who needs to speak with Council authorities." There was a long pause. "Wanderer, you were in Shadowmaw territory. Are you saying you survived contact with hostile aliens?" "Affirmative, Control. And the aliens aren't hostile. That's why I need to speak with Council authorities immediately." Another pause, longer this time. Jake could imagine the confusion in the control room. No one survived contact with Shadowmaw. It was simply not possible. Wanderer, proceed to Docking Bay 7. Do not disembark until security arrives. This is for your own protection. Jake docked the ship and waited. Within minutes, the docking bay filled with security officers in full combat armor. Their weapons were drawn and ready. Jake activated the ship's external speakers. "My name is Captain Jake Miller," he announced. "I am a human citizen in good standing with the Council. I have important information about the species you call Shadowmaw. I request immediate contact with the station commander." The security team leader spoke through his suit's amplifier. "Captain Miller, open your cargo bay slowly. Keep your hands visible. Are you injured or under alien influence?" "I'm fine," Jake replied, "but I need to warn you. My passenger is a Shadowmaw, but he's peaceful. Please don't shoot first and ask questions later." The announcement caused immediate panic among the security team. Several officers raised their weapons toward the ship. The team leader was shouting orders into his radio, calling for backup and medical teams. Jake opened the cargo bay doors slowly. Raven emerged carefully, keeping all 6 arms visible and moving with deliberate slowness. The alien had practiced this moment during the journey, knowing that any sudden movement could trigger a violent response. The security officers stumbled backward, their weapons trained on Raven. The massive alien stood perfectly still in the docking bay lights, golden, eyes calm and patient. "Please do not be afraid," Raven said, the universal translator making his voice echo strangely in the large space. "I come in peace to speak with your leaders." One of the security officers fainted. Another was frantically calling for reinforcements. The team leader stood frozen, his weapon shaking in his hands. "He's not going to hurt anyone," Jake said, stepping out of his ship to stand beside Raven. "His name is Raven. He saved my life on Keth Prime. Everything you think you know about his people is wrong." Station Commander Ellis arrived with a full battalion of Marines. The older woman took one look at Raven and immediately ordered her troops to form a defensive perimeter. But she did not order them to fire. "Captain Miller," she said, her voice steady despite the extraordinary situation, "explain to me how you are standing next to a living Shadowmaw without being torn apart. Because Shadowmaw aren't the monsters." "You think they are," Jake replied. "They're intelligent, civilized, and peaceful unless attacked first. They've been defending themselves from Council aggression for centuries." Commander Ellis studied Raven carefully. The alien remained motionless, allowing the examination. "It can speak?" "I can speak for myself, Commander," Raven said. "I am Raven of the 3rd Hunting Ground, philosopher and teacher among my people. I have come to correct the misunderstandings between our species." "Misunderstandings?" Commander Ellis repeated. "Your people have killed thousands of Council citizens." "Only those who attacked us first," Raven replied calmly. "We defended our territory from invaders who came with weapons and hostile intent. If someone breaks into your home with a gun, do you not defend yourself?" The commander was quiet for a long moment, considering this. Around the docking bay, Marines and security officers watched in amazement as a civilized conversation took place with the galaxy's most feared predator. "You're asking me to believe that every encounter we've had with your species was a misunderstanding," Commander Ellis said. "I am asking you to consider the possibility," Raven replied, "and to examine your own records with new eyes. Did any of your ships approach Keth Prime in peace? Did any offer greetings instead of weapons?" Jake watched the commander's face as she thought about this. He could see the moment when doubt crept in, when she began to question assumptions that had seemed certain just minutes before. The Council emergency session was held in the largest conference room on Station Alpha. Representatives from 12 different species gathered around a circular table, their faces showing everything from curiosity to outright terror. Raven sat in a specially reinforced chair, towering over everyone else but keeping perfectly still. Ambassador Thane of the Vorthen spoke first. His reptilian features were tight with suspicion. This creature claims to be peaceful, but our records show over 300 attacks by its species. Defensive actions, Raven corrected gently. Your ships always approach with weapons active and shields raised. They broadcast hostile intent before any communication is attempted. Standard precautions. Ambassador Clicks of the Krill hissed through her translator. Your reputation precedes you. Jake leaned forward in his chair. That's exactly the problem. You created the reputation based on fear, not facts. No one ever tried to talk to them first. Commander Ellis had spent hours reviewing historical records since Raven's arrival. She activated the conference room's main display. I've been looking at our encounter logs. Captain Miller is right. In every recorded contact with Shadowmoor, Council ships approached in battle formation. The display showed tactical recordings from dozens of encounters over the past century. Ship after ship approached Keth Prime with weapons charged and shields at maximum. In every case, the Shadowmaw had responded to what they perceived as an attack. We treated them like monsters. Commander Ellis continued, so they defended themselves like any intelligent species would. Ambassador Nara of the Luminari floated closer to examine Raven. Her energy-based form shimmered with nervous light. How do we know this is not deception? Perhaps this individual is different from the others. I am typical of my people in most ways, Raven replied. We value strength, honor, and the protection of our territory. We also value knowledge, art, and the pursuit of wisdom. These are not traits of mindless predators. Prove it, Ambassador Thane demanded. Show us evidence of this supposed civilization. Raven reached into a pouch and withdrew what looked like a small crystal sculpture. The object was incredibly detailed, showing a scene of Shadowmaw working together to build something that resembled a living city. The craftsmanship was beyond anything the Council representatives had seen. This is memory crystal, Raven explained. It contains recorded history of my people. Architecture, philosophy, art, science, all preserved in living memory. Jake watched. As the crystal was passed around the table, each ambassador examined it with growing amazement. The detail was impossible to fake, and the technology was clearly advanced. There are libraries of these on Keth Prime, Raven continued. Thousands of years of accumulated knowledge. My people would be willing to share this information in exchange for peaceful contact. Ambassador Clicks set down the crystal with shaking hands. This changes everything. If your people possess this level of technology and culture, then we have made a terrible mistake. Mistakes can be corrected, Raven said. But it requires courage to admit error and wisdom to choose a better path. The debate that followed lasted for hours. Some ambassadors remained suspicious, arguing that the Shadowmaw could not be trusted. Others saw the opportunity for peaceful contact with a previously unknown civilization. Commander Ellis provided more evidence from the station's databases, showing how Council preconceptions had shaped every encounter. Finally, Ambassador Nara spoke for the group. We propose a formal first contact protocol. A diplomatic mission to Keth Prime with the goal of establishing peaceful relations. And who would lead such a mission? Ambassador Thane asked. Who has the experience to negotiate with these beings? All. Eyes turned to Jake. He felt the weight of history settling on his shoulders. I'll do it, he said quietly. Raven and I can serve as ambassadors between our peoples. You are just a cargo pilot, Ambassador Clicks protested. This requires trained diplomats. With respect, Jake replied. Trained diplomats created this mess in the first place. Sometimes it takes ordinary people to find extraordinary solutions. Raven placed one massive hand gently on Jake's shoulder. I support this choice. Jake Miller has shown more wisdom in dealing with my people than all your previous expeditions combined. The vote was close, but the motion passed. Jake would return to Keth Prime as the Council's first official ambassador to the Shadowmaw. Raven would serve as guide and cultural liaison. A small diplomatic team would accompany them, along with scientists and medical personnel. The preparation took 2 weeks. Jake's ship was upgraded with better communication equipment and diplomatic protocols. The crew was carefully selected from volunteers who could keep open minds about the mission. Most importantly, all weapons were removed from the ship and replaced with gifts and trade goods. No weapons, Jake insisted during the final briefing. We approach in peace or we don't approach at all. The journey back to Keth Prime felt different this time. Jake was no longer a stranded pilot hoping to survive another day. He was an ambassador carrying the hopes of multiple species. The responsibility was overwhelming, but Raven's presence made it manageable. "You are nervous," Raven observed. They dropped out of hyperspace near the planet. "Terrified," Jake admitted. "What if this doesn't work? What if your people don't trust the council representatives?" "Then we try again," Raven said simply. Change does not happen quickly, but persistence makes it possible. The diplomatic landing went better than anyone had hoped. Raven had sent messages ahead, explaining the situation to the other Shadowmaw. When Jake's ship touched down in the same clearing where he had crashed months earlier, a delegation was waiting to greet them. The council representatives were nervous. At first, faced with a dozen massive aliens who could tear them apart without effort. But the Shadowmaw were curious and welcoming, eager to finally communicate with the species they had been fighting for so long. Dr. Wells, the mission's lead scientist, was amazed by Shadowmaw biotechnology. "Their medical knowledge is centuries ahead of ours," she told Jake after examining their healing techniques. "They can regrow entire limbs using targeted biological enhancement." Engineer Torres was equally impressed by their construction methods. "They don't build cities, they grow them. The entire settlement is one massive living organism that adapts to the needs of its inhabitants." Most importantly, the cultural exchange went smoothly. The Shadowmaw were fascinated by human concepts of cooperation and mutual aid. Humans were amazed by Shadowmaw philosophy and their integration with their environment. "Your people and mine have much to learn from each other," Raven told Jake as they watched the two groups working together to establish a permanent research station. Jake nodded, looking out over the jungle that had once seemed so hostile. Now it felt like home. "I think this is just the beginning." Ships from other council species began arriving within days of the first successful contact. The Vorthen brought mining equipment to help establish permanent facilities. The Krill offered their advanced communication technology to improve translation between species. The Luminari shared their energy manipulation techniques with Shadowmaw biotechnology experts. What had once been a forbidden world was becoming the center of a new kind of galactic cooperation. Jake Miller, the cargo pilot who had survived a crash landing, found himself at the heart of the most important diplomatic breakthrough in Council history.